Elements of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory that evaluates actions based on their outcomes, specifically aiming to maximize overall well-being. While various forms of utilitarianism exist, they generally share several core elements. Consequentialism. Consequentialism is the principle that the moral value of an action is determined solely by its outcomes or consequences. In utilitarianism, this means that an action is considered morally right if it produces the greatest overall well-being or happiness compared to alternative actions, and wrong if it leads to less favorable results. This element emphasizes outcome-based ethical reasoning, focusing on the effects of actions rather than intentions, rules, or inherent qualities. For example, donating to a charity that effectively reduces poverty is considered morally right under consequentialism because it produces significant positive outcomes for many people. Welfarism. Welfarism is the principle that the well-being or welfare of individuals is the ultimate measure of value in ethical decision-making. In utilitarianism, actions are judged based on their impact on the happiness, preferences, or quality of life of those affected. The goal is to promote overall welfare, ensuring that decisions maximize positive outcomes and minimize harm. For example, a government implementing universal healthcare aims to improve the welfare of its citizens, reflecting the welfarist focus on enhancing well-being as the central ethical criterion. Impartiality. Impartiality requires that each individual's well-being is given equal consideration when evaluating the morality of an action. In utilitarianism, no one person's happiness or suffering is considered more important than another's. Ethical decisions must weigh the interests of all affected equally. For example, when allocating limited resources in a disaster, impartiality means aid should be distributed based on need and potential benefit rather than social status, personal relationships, or nationality, ensuring that every individual's welfare is fairly accounted for. Aggregationism. Aggregationism is the principle that the overall moral value of an action is determined by summing the well-being of all individuals affected. In utilitarianism, this means that actions are evaluated based on the total or collective utility they produce, rather than focusing on a single person or a subset of people. For example, when a city decides to build a new public park, aggregationism considers the combined happiness of all residents who will benefit from it, aiming to maximize overall community well-being. Hedonism or preference satisfaction. Hedonism or preference satisfaction refers to the idea that the moral value of an action is determined by the extent to which it increases pleasure, happiness, or the fulfillment of individuals' informed preferences. Classical utilitarianism emphasizes pleasure and the avoidance of pain, while modern preference utilitarianism focuses on satisfying people's considered desires or interests. For example, a teacher choosing to implement a learning method that students find engaging and fulfilling acts in accordance with preference satisfaction as it promotes their well-being and overall satisfaction. Universalism. Universalism in utilitarianism holds that moral principles apply to all individuals capable of experiencing well-being or suffering, regardless of personal relationships, nationality, or social status. Every affected person's happiness or preferences must be considered equally in ethical decision-making. For example, when addressing climate change, universalism requires considering the long-term effects on people worldwide, not just the citizens of one country, ensuring that actions aim to maximize overall well-being across all affected individuals. Practicality, calculability. Practicality or calculability refers to the ability to assess and compare the likely consequences of different actions to guide moral decision-making. In utilitarianism, ethical choices often involve estimating which actions will maximize overall well-being, using available information and reasoning. For example, a public health official deciding between vaccination programs may calculate the potential reduction in illness and deaths for each option, selecting the one that produces the greatest overall benefit in a practical and measurable way. Moral flexibility. Moral flexibility in utilitarianism emphasizes that ethical rules and norms can be adapted or overridden when doing so leads to greater overall well-being. Rather than adhering rigidly to fixed principles, utilitarianism allows for context-sensitive judgments based on the consequences of actions. For example, while lying is generally discouraged, a doctor may choose to withhold distressing information from a patient if it prevents severe emotional harm, demonstrating flexibility in moral decision-making to maximize overall happiness. For more, visit bestsocialwork.com, do not forget to like, share,